Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. Today's episode is Charmed Season 2, Episode 13, Animal Pragmatism. The episode in a nutshell is just a brief reminder of exactly what happens within this episode. So the episode opens with Phoebe attending one of her college classes and kind of making eyes at a fellow student named Ethan, while her friends discuss not having dates for Valentine's Day and a book of love spells that they picked up on at the campus store. And basically Phoebe reads one of the spells out of it and tells them how it is wrong, it's in the wrong order, and she basically corrects the spell. We then later see that those three friends have gathered three animals and attempt to do the spell from the book, which of course when they do it fails, but then they remember that Phoebe had actually made changes to the spell, and one of the girls, Andrea, actually happened to record Phoebe saying the corrected spell, and of course when they play the recording, Phoebe being an actual witch and having a valid spell, does in fact turn the animals into humans, and at first things seem to be going well. They've got the dates that they were looking for from the animals that they had chosen. However, the animals then decide that they quite enjoy being human and don't want to be cooped up in their little apartment room. So the animals then go out, cause some trouble, but do eventually make their way back to the girls' room when they start to notice that they're turning back and find out that they only have 24 hours for the spell, which upsets them. But Phoebe's friends happily throw her under the bus and let them know that Phoebe will be able to turn them human, and that then sets them to try to find Phoebe. However, of course, when the girls start having second thoughts, the first to have second thoughts, Tessa, ends up being basically put in a cage in the dorm that one of the animals had previously been kept in, and then the other two at first go along with trying to find Phoebe, but after the animals break and enter into the manor, they also start to have second thoughts and they end up poisoned by the man who was turned human from originally a snake that happened to be venomous. And they then are put in the trunk of the car, brought to Piper's Club, P3. And then once they are in the club, Phoebe tries to reverse the spell, turning them back into animals, but she ends up turning everybody in the club into animals. And then when she turns them back into humans, they also turn human, this time permanently, and they try to fight Piper and Prue, who have found the girls in the trunk, but basically Piper knocks out the snake guy, freezes the rabbit guy who was hurting or attempting to hurt Prue, and when the police arrive, because the animals had been leaving a trail of criminal activity right to the club, they then are arrested, so they get to be treated like humans and caged like humans, as Piper says. And then while that little saga is going on, we have the subplot of Prue being newly unemployed and not dealing with not being busy very well, and she comes to a realization that she needs to be busy. She just wants to find something she enjoys being busy at. And then we have the romantic drama, which is fitting for the Valentine's Day episode, which of course is the fact that Leo has become human, or mortal, we should say, and Piper's with Dan, but now Leo's there. Dan gets insecure and jealous over Leo being there. Leo, of course, is still determined to fight for Piper and to earn her love back away from Dan, and there's that back and forth between them all. So now that we've been reminded about what happens within the episode, it's time to rank the episode on our two lists, our mostly objective ranking list, and then our personal ranking list after that. So we'll start with our mostly objective rank values, and we start with our single episode supporting character introductions, which of course is Ethan, Tessa, Andrea and Brooke, which brings us to 4 points. We then have our multi-season main character development, which is the fact that Leo, since becoming mortal, doesn't have ID, doesn't have any paperwork or accounts or licenses or anything like that. So he is now working at Piper's club and sleeping at P3 as well. And Piper is paying him in cash because, again, he has no accounts or cards or anything like that that he could use. We also, just as an honorable mention, Phoebe in this episode, when she turns the entire club of people into animals, basically gives a little bit of an announcement to all of the animals that she is a vegetarian and therefore has never eaten any of them. And I don't remember if this really comes up at any other point in the series or even if it's something that they stick with, but at least in this episode, she has claimed to be a vegetarian, and that is a new development of the characters. We did not previously know this. And then our last positive is the main relationship development. And that is also worth 4 points. And also goes hand in hand with the first negative, which is the main relationships regression slash breakups, which is a -3 points. In this case, I decided to keep this, kind of combine this one. So it's only really worth 1 point when considering because there were ups and downs. There was Leo got Piper flowers. That is a development. But then she just gives him a paycheck, which is a bit of a step backwards. She's planning a romantic dinner with Dan. She doesn't make that dinner. Her and Dan get into arguments about Leo, which is regression, but then at the same time, he is the one she decides to go to dinner with. She's buying a gift for Dan. Her sisters bring up, "What did you get Leo?" She goes looking for a card for Leo. Dan finds the card for Leo, gets upset about it. Leo gives her a beautiful card. She has a dream sequence imagining of running across the club and kissing him passionately, but then ultimately decides to go to dinner with Dan instead of following through on what she imagined doing. And so it was a lot of back and forth, which is pretty much how it's going to be until she makes a choice. There's always going to be that she wants to be with Leo, but obviously is with Dan, doesn't want to break up with Dan just for Leo. And there's that whole up and down, up and down. But both Leo and Dan had some ups, and then both Leo and Dan had some downs. So we're just evening it out, canceling them out together. However, one is worth 4 points, one is worth 3. So overall, positive 1 point for that piece. We then have our negative messaging or behavior, which is worth a -2 points. And because they're animals and not humans, there was some forgiveness for the animals' poor behavior. However, the girls as well, Tessa, Andrea, and Brooke, they also take part in some not very good behavior, breaking and entering into the manor. Andrea is trusted with the class register and decides to use that for her personal gain to find out where Phoebe lives and then bring the animals to her house to break into it, which of course is gross misuse of private information. And so naturally very negative. And then the breaking and entering, of course, is criminal behavior. Like I said, I don't hold animals to human standards, even if they are in human form. So there was a lot of negative behaviors that the animals took part in. But like I said, I'm not counting that. This is specifically the mortal human girls who should have known better and their poor behavior being called out. So that's the -2. And then there's a -4 just because I felt like the whole plot with the animals was a weak plot. I mean, it definitely had enough focus on it that that was the main plot of the episode, but it just felt boring. It felt pointless. And I also didn't feel like I would really need it to be there. And it didn't even really go along, like the only tying into like the whole Valentine's Day thing was just that these three girls had no dates and they decided to make them out of animals, and then everything goes wrong. Eh, it wasn't a great plot. I do really like the subplot with Dan, Leo, and Piper's triangle, but at the same time, I also prefer when they aren't a triangle because triangles, frankly speaking, are just not my personal cup of tea. But this point is for the weak main plot concept, which is the animal one, which, like I said, overall, kind of boring, didn't necessarily need to be there, could have done without it, didn't even really fit the theme beyond the fact that they were made human for the purpose of a Valentine's Day date. Overall, weak. And that then brings us, with all the points being calculated together, to 3 out of 10 for this episode. So, as a reminder of our season 2 rankings so far for our mostly objective list, in first place we have Witch Trial, The Painted World, She's a Man Baby, a Man, They're Everywhere, P3H2O, Ms. Hellfire, Awakened, Morality Bites, Heartbreak City, That Old Black Magic, Reckless Abandon, Animal Pragmatism comes in 12th, and then last place is The Devil's Music. So on my personal ranking, as I mentioned, I wasn't fond of this main plot. The subplot even was not bad. Like I do like the romance drama of it all. But as I've mentioned in previous episodes, I know Leo is endgame. I like Leo better than Dan, even though I think Dan is a really good guy. I also think he deserves someone who's all in on him, and Piper never will be. And even before we know that Leo is endgame, like if this was the first time we were watching it, it's very clear that Piper has extremely strong feelings for Leo. And even while she's with Dan, she's constantly second guessing. Even when Leo was out of the picture, she was getting a necklace and being all like awkward about it because she kind of wished it came from Leo, according to Prue at least. So, because it's obvious, really, even if this was the first watch through, it's pretty obvious Piper is more into Leo, but is holding on to Dan because of other factors as well as her feelings. Like, I don't think she doesn't love Dan. I think she loves Dan as well. And I think she's holding on to Dan because he's stable, he's nice, he's mortal, he's safe as an option, whereas Leo is not. But I feel like her feelings for Leo just come across, at least to me as an audience member, and partially biased by the fact that I do know that he is the end game, as stronger. Like even that imagination sequence. She gets a letter from him, even though she's seeing Dan, and her immediate imagining vision sequence is to run across the club and kiss him passionately before then deciding ultimately in reality to go to dinner with Dan. Yeah, like when Dan was getting her gifts, for example, in Heartbreak City when he got her the necklace, she was awkward about it. She didn't really want, like, she found it awkward that he was giving it to her. She couldn't reject it, but she wasn't overly enthusiastic about receiving it. And as I mentioned, when they're waiting in line for the bathroom in that episode, Prue even mentions that, is it because you wish it came from Leo? So I think even the show was kind of hinting at the fact that her and Dan's relationship, while not weak, is not as strong as hers and Leo's. So the plots in this one weren't very great. I did like the Valentine's Day theme in the club, like all the hearts made out of flowers, the flower bouquets that were being given, the red curtains, the red themed outfits and such. I did enjoy the Valentine's Day theming. Then, of course, we had one of our honorable mention, one single episode flirtations, which was Ethan and Phoebe, and she flirts with him in class, invites him to P3's club night, meets him again when she goes looking for Tessa, Andrea, and Brooke, and then ultimately at the end of the episode dances with him at P3. But that's as far as it goes. We never hear from him again. It's barely worth a mention. It ended as soon as it started, essentially. Obviously, I did find it kind of interesting how, even though it was the three mortal girls who cast the spell, there were still personal gain consequences because it was ultimately Phoebe's magic that made the spell work and her recorded voice. And I found it interesting how intent didn't really matter with regards to personal gain consequences, because Phoebe's intent obviously was completely like, this spell is in the wrong order. Let me rewrite it as it should be for a proper spell. She had no intent to actually cast it. And then the girls are mortals, they don't have their own magic. Their intent was to use it for personal gain. So they basically, their personal gain plus Phoebe's intent equals the spell worked. And there were personal gain consequences, which came with the animals obviously not being what they were looking for, and them getting, two of them getting poisoned, one of them getting put into a cage. And then the animals, of course, all of their crime sprees would not have happened had they not decided to cast that spell. And then the last thing isn't really necessarily an opinion, but it's just an observation that I had. So the three animals that they choose is a pig, a rabbit, and a snake. The snake being a villain makes sense to me. Just standardly, snakes are villains in pretty much every story that they take place in. Like even in Harry Potter, the house that was symbolized by a snake is the evil house. People associate snakes with villainy, therefore that one makes sense to me. Pigs, obviously a domesticated pig is pretty harmless and is known for being a glutton just because they're rotund and will eat almost anything. There's been a few episodes of some crime shows where they show that they will eat anything. And then there's the rabbit. And I don't really understand why the rabbit was the villain's, like on the villain's snake side. Like they were partners, why the rabbit was going around killing people, because rabbits are completely like a prey animal. They are not a predatory species at all. And like, yeah, they have teeth, but they don't usually eat living other, like, they don't kill other creatures. They typically eat like grass. And if it's a cartoon, carrots and things of that nature. They don't eat other animals. They're not a predatory species. They are a prey species. Pigs, you have an argument, like, pigs are descended of wild boars before they were like domesticated. Boars are known to be violent. Boars can kill people. I mean, look at Game of Thrones. Robert was gored by a boar. Like, I feel like the pig would have had a better chance at being the villain than a rabbit of all things. And then they chose to make the rabbit the villain, sidekick to the snake villain. And honestly, I don't understand why, because like that's just not what a rabbit is. Like if you were going by even like just like the Andrea who chose the rabbit as her animal chose it for the cliche like sex drive. And that's what that was. But again, like rabbits aren't villains, so I don't understand why they chose to make the rabbit a villain alongside the snake. The pig was kind of harmless, and he was the one who ended up being taken out by his fellows for being, you know, cowardly, not wanting to keep going, wanting to maybe be okay with turning back into an animal. But I feel like that really should have been the role of the rabbit, or the rabbit and pig should have been on the same side rather than the rabbit being a villain. I don't really understand the decision, as I keep repeating. Circular thinking and all that. And then the last call out I wanted to give was, of course, that the shining star moment of this episode was when Phoebe was reversing the spell. She ended up turning the entire club into animals, which was hilarious. And then when she turns them back, of course, goes back like nothing ever happened. But that was a fun scene where you had a club filled with all of the animals, but it wasn't enough to save the episode. So Overall, was it the worst episode? No. But was it what I would consider one of the good episodes? Also, no. And I honestly agreed with the objective ranking for this episode and gave it a 3 out of 10 for myself as well. And so, as a reminder of our season 2 rankings so far in our personal ranking, in first place we have P3H2O, Awakened, Ms. Hellfire, Heartbreak City, Witch Trial, The Painted World, They're Everywhere, Reckless Abandon, She's a Man, Baby, a Man, The Devil's Music. This episode came into 11th place, Animal Pragmatism. Then we have Morality Bites, and in 13th, That Old Black Magic. Which now brings us to our final segment, which is, of course, where we are ranking each of the seasons against each other. So in season 1, on our mostly objective ranking, we ended with 73.18%. And so far in season 2, we have accumulated a score of 99 out of 220. Then on the personal side, season 1 ended with 71.50%. And season 2 has so far gotten 70 points out of 220. So with that, we've now rewatched and ranked Charmed Season 2, Episode 13, Animal Pragmatism. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.